Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Igor and this is WN Fall and this is day 2. So we are ready to move on with our great speakers. We have prepared an amazing lineup for you today. So we are expecting guys from Defold Foundation, Critic Gaming, Oma Games, Gizmart, Blizzard Entertainment, Wargaming, and Flexer to join us for today. And I can't wait to hear their talks. So today we are live from Amsterdam, virtually, which is great. And the sponsor of the day is My Tracker. So guys, if you haven't been in touch with this amazing platform, please do yourself a favor. And right now we are ready to welcome our first speakers of the second half of the day. And I believe we already do have them in the studio, do we?
Yes, indeed.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hi, fine,
Good.
thank you. Happy to be here.
That's great. Welcome, Björn and Marius. So before we start, first of all, could you tell me where are you located right now?
I'm in Stockholm.
That's great.
And I'm from Bucharest.
Wow, we have an amazing geography here. So yielding the stage for now to you. You can start, Björn.
Okay, thank you so much. So welcome everyone to this presentation titled Rooting for the Underdog. So let's jump right in. Oops, there we go. So here's the agenda for my presentation. So we're going to do a very quick intro of me in 6 seconds, a default intro in 60 seconds. Then we're going to talk a bit about game engine due diligence. We're going to talk about the common developer problems and how we can uncover hidden value in a game engine to solve these problems. And then I'm going to hand over to Marius for a case study, and then we'll take questions at the end. I think we're running a bit late, so we're trying to keep it short. So let's jump straight in. So my name is Björn Ritzl. I'm the product owner of the Defold game engine. I'm also a board member of the Defold Foundation. I've worked with mobile game development since before the smartphones, and I love retro and old school games. So Defold then. Defold is a cross-platform game engine and editor. It supports desktop, mobile, web, and most recently also console with Nintendo Switch support. It was created in 2011 by these two handsome gentlemen, Ragnar Svensson and Christian Murray. They worked at Avalanche and had a hobby project, side project, which was Defold. And they made it their full-time business. And in 2014, they contacted King, who were at that time shopping around for a new game engine for their games, and they got acquired. In 2016, Defold was released for free for anyone to use. So it had been used internally at King for a couple of years, but the idea was also to give it away for free for anyone to download without any strings attached. So at GDC in 2016, it was also made freely available for anyone. And since then, a lot of studios, external studios, have picked it up. So we have Melsoft Games with their Family Island title, a smash hit on mobile. We have Critique Gaming with the Interrogation, which we'll hear more about later. And then also a lot of other games as well. And then some exciting news happened in May of 2020 this year. So Defold was moved outside of King to an independent software foundation, the Defold Foundation. The source code was also at the same time made available for free for anyone to use. And since then, the Defold Foundation has partnered with several publishers, game developers, software services, and so on. All right, so that's Defold. So let's talk a bit about game engine due diligence, because there's more game engines than Defold, and there's a ton of different game engines. And as the studio, there's a lot of choice. But how do you know which game engine is actually the correct one? And there's obviously more game engines than these, but for these few examples, I've picked out Godot, Defold, Cocos, GameMaker, Unity, and Unreal. But there's, as I said, obviously a lot more choices out there. And perhaps you want to do your own custom engine as well. So how do you choose? Really tricky question, and it's very important to get it right, because you have to live with this decision, usually for at least several months, maybe several years. So how do you pick the right engine? Perhaps you should just go by familiarity, which is the most popular one. And yeah, I guess that's Unity at the moment, but there's a lot of up-and-coming engines, and like Godot, for instance, getting a lot of traction. Defold is probably the underdog, but still we have a lot of users as well. And they are creating amazing games. But maybe familiarity is the best, because then you have developers already familiar with the tool, and as you know, it's you can get up to speed a lot faster if you use something that you're very familiar with and your developers like, and so on. But it might not always be that the game engine that you're familiar with is the best tool. You don't always build an entire house with just a hammer. You probably need other tools sometimes. So perhaps we should look beyond familiarity and popularity and maybe look at features. Perhaps that's a good measure. So how many features does the game engine support? And if, for instance, we take a look at the websites of these engines and just try to count the number of features they list. Defold, we're obviously bragging about 70 different features, while Unity only has 60. And Cocos, they're very modest and only have 9 features listed on their website. But it's probably very obvious that this is not the truth. So you can't really look at just the feature list and from the feature list say that, oh, one engine is better than the other. You need to do something else as well. So what if we take a look at the kind of genre of our game and maybe the platform we intend to publish on? Perhaps that could give us some insights and help as well. So let's go back to our familiar 6 engines and say that we want to do a 3D game. Then Unity and Unreal, obviously, they're very good choices. They're very proven. Godot is adding a lot of amazing 3D functionality. Defold is a 3D engine, but the tooling has been more geared towards 2D game development. So while you can do a 3D game, it's probably better to choose another engine. And the same for Cocos. It has a lot of 3D features, but not at all comparable to the other ones. And GameMaker is obviously more or less fully 2D. So if we want to do a 2D game instead, well, then it looks a bit different. Unreal, yeah, you might be able to do a 2D game as well, but probably not a very good choice. So then you have other engines to choose from. And what if we want to do a web game, an HTML5 game? Then all of them are valid choices. Good, but it doesn't help us really. What if we want to do an instant game? So a game being played in a messenger application. So for instance, Telegram or Facebook instant games. And if we look at the Facebook instant games developer page, Facebook developer pages, we see that they only list Defold, Cocos, and GameMaker as compatible engines, while Godot, Unreal, and Unity aren't listed at all. And that's because their engines are too big, so the game will not be able to start fast enough. All right, so what if we don't want to do a console game? Yeah, then GameMaker, Unity, Unreal have you covered. On Defold, we only have Nintendo Switch, so that's a limitation. Godot supports all, but that's through third-party porting companies. And I'm not sure about Cocos, but I think that's more or less the same. It's not official support as far as I know. So we can get some help at least by just figuring out what kind of game we want to do and the platform we want to ship it on. But is that enough? Maybe we need to do something else as well when we make our decision. So still some help from looking at features maybe and platform, but maybe we should also ask ourselves, what kind of day-to-day struggles will our developers have each and every day? What kind of issues will they be facing when they use your engine of choice and when they develop your game? So if we take a look at, just crawl around on the internet looking at Reddit, Stack Overflow, and so on, we see that there are a couple of very common themes. So one could be, oh, the long build times are killing me. I have to go get a coffee every time I build my game. Or we are constantly dealing with breaking changes in the engine. Or in the last mile, oh, damn, my APK is too big. I can't publish it. Or I need to update Xcode again. Or supporting multiple platforms is a pain in the beep. So these are some of the very common themes that, from experience and from just looking at developer discussions on the internet, these are recurring and these are important to deal with in a very good way. And some of it can be solved by choosing the right engine. So I'm going to jump into each of these and show how Defold, how our thoughts and the how we try to deal with these and remove developer obstacles during the development cycle of a game. So if we start by looking at the first one, supporting multiple platforms is a pain in the ass. And as we know, most game engines are cross-platform, but are they like truly cross-platform? And by truly cross-platform, I mean, can you export to all platforms from a single code base without any hassle? I'm not entirely convinced that all game engines can say an affirmative yes on this. But with Defold, we have really tried to solve this by having cross-platform APIs. So for instance, when it comes to rendering, we have a scriptable render pipeline in Defold. It takes care of, on a high level, WebGL, OpenGL, and Vulkan in a single API. So you don't have to care about the graphics backend. When you want to do in-app purchases in a mobile game, for instance, we have a cross-platform API that takes care of purchasing. So you can do purchases with Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook from a single code base. Same for file I/O, networking, TCP, UDP, HTTP, and WebSockets. It works from a single API. And when it comes to input, for instance, you can, in Defold, you react to game actions instead of specific input capabilities coming from a gamepad or touch or a keyboard, for instance. And all of this is something that's very important, because you don't want to have a lot of branching code in your game engine. So you want to have high-level APIs that take care of the underlying platform specifics. So that's what I mean by cross-platform APIs and being truly cross-platform, being able to publish from a single code base to all platforms without having to do a lot of branching and code that you need to maintain. All right, moving on. So I need to update Xcode again. So that's a serious problem of having to update additional build tools outside of the engine. And in Defold, we have what we call a zero setup policy, meaning that you should only ever have to download and install Defold once. One download, nothing more. So how do we solve that? Well, so first of all, we do all of the heavy lifting. So we first of all provide pre-built engine binaries for all platforms. And then we require no additional tools to package your application. So you don't need an Xcode installation to do an IPA or an app file, or for Android, when you don't want to do an APK or Android app bundle, you don't need Android Studio installed or even the command line tools. And the same for the other platforms. We take care of the entire packaging process. So it means that anyone in your team will be able to just download Defold, open your project, and generate the final application bundle without any hassle. A developer, an artist, your product manager will be able to do it. It's not a big deal because we take care of the heavy lifting. And also, if you have some additional native code hooking into the engine, we also provide build servers. So you don't have to set up your own custom build process for this either. So, but you can. It's open sourced and shared. So if you want to host your own build server, you can do that as well. But we provide it for free. All right, moving on. So we are constantly dealing with breaking changes. That's a very recurring theme with a lot of other game engines, that when a new release is out of a game engine, you need to spend time dealing with breaking changes. And you really don't want that. So we try to solve that by having a very strict design process and doing very iterative releases. And I saw a product manager doing an estimate for the resources he needed for his next project using another game engine. And he had actually set aside one full-time developer dealing with breaking changes in the engine they had chosen. And that's pretty crazy, right? And a real waste of resources. So for us, we try to be very careful about designing our APIs. Once an API is released, it shouldn't be removed, because that will introduce breaking changes. And the API signatures should preferably never change either, because it's a lot of hassle, and you should be able to open a project that is years old and be able to still build and run it using the latest version of the engine and tools. We also have a very iterative development process, so we don't ship huge features at once. Instead, we try to break it down into the minimum viable product and release that first and get that into the hands of the developers and get their feedback. And also we do monthly releases, so it's not like one release every half year or something. It's you get new versions iteratively and every month, and you can also join in on the beta process and get dev builds and give feedback to us while we work. And I think this is really important. You don't want to have to worry constantly about your game breaking because you get a new version of the editor or the engine, sorry. All right, moving on. So the last mile. So why is my APK so big? That's also, there's restrictions, and you really need to be aware of these, and anything the engine can do to help you there is actually super important. And for us, we always put performance first, and we design for size, speed, and memory at all times, which means that we have a very small engine core with a small set of APIs. And for us, every byte counts, so we're very conscious about what we add. No overhead in libraries if we can avoid it. We do a lot of due diligence when investigating which third-party libraries to use, so we don't bloat the engine, because we want a small engine and it should be small out of the box. You shouldn't have to do a lot of special tricks to get a small engine that doesn't bloat your game. And I just took Unity and Godot and published with default settings for Android, iOS, and HTML5. And as you can see, the default version is like a third of the size. And that's pretty significant, because at least a couple of years ago, there was some research made that said that every 6 megs of increase in an APK size resulted in a 1% decrease in installs. And that's quite significant. And just by looking at the engine size there, you'd lose 1% of your players by choosing a larger engine. And Defold can also, since you have a very small engine, it opens up new possibilities. So I mentioned instant games previously, and you're also able to use Defold for very resource-constrained devices like iOS, which is like a Firefox OS branch off with feature phones that are capable of running games on WebGL. All right, moving on. So how do you deal with long build times? Because you really want to have this kind of iterative workflow when you have a game engine. You don't want to constantly have to wait for your changes to be visible so you can test. You want to be able to iterate fast and find the fun in your game. And you have to do that by iterating on the game, and you don't want to wait while iterating because that kills creativity basically. So we always try to reduce build times and preferably remove them completely. So we have something called hot reload. It's not unique. You find it in other engines as well. But for us, we really want the developer to be able to reload anything. It should be assets, it should be code, shaders, the render pipeline. You should be able to make any kind of change into your running game, even on device, so that you don't even have to rebuild the whole thing. And if you do an incremental build, it should be very fast on small projects and only a couple of seconds on a larger project. So reducing build times, being able to be creative and being able to iterate on your game, that's key. All right, so these are a few examples of common developer problems that we have decided to solve in a way that's might not be groundbreaking, but we see that other engines at least sometimes miss these points. And I think it's a very important thing to have in your mind while investigating and evaluating game engines, that look beyond the feature list and look beyond just like popularity, and actually spend the time doing the research, trying things out, and asking your developers, what are your day-to-day problems and how can we solve them? All right, I think that's it for me. So I thank you so much for your attention. And now I'm going to hand over to Marius for a case study.
Thank you very much, Björn. Yeah, could you please turn off your screen sharing so we can switch to Marius right now? Thank you very much. Great. Let's continue. Sorry, Marius, we can't hear you. Yeah, could you please check the preferences?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Great. Great job. Thanks. Let's continue.
Hi there. I'm Marius. I work for Critic Gaming. We're a small studio from Bucharest, and I'm gonna be very quick. We're working on well, we've released a game called Interrogation. It's a noir detective story that explores topics such as radicalization. And it kind of looks like this. You interrogate people. And I'm gonna talk a bit about our workflow. And I'm gonna start with with my department's workflow, with programming. And I'm gonna talk about a few little things that Defold does that makes our job a bit easier. So, I know this doesn't seem like much, but all the metadata files in Defold are in a text format, and this makes our life really easy. It looks kind of like this, and what you can do is like you can find and replace things in your whole project, and it's gonna be easy. It's not some binary format, it's not some weird XML. It also plays very well with Git, so you can do code reviews, you can look over diffs, and they're gonna be understandable to a human being. And what's really cool about this is that this is protobuf, so you can find readily available libraries for Python or for some other languages. So we've done that to automate some repetitive tasks just by modifying the metadata files when we had to do some complicated things. Now, another cool thing about Defold is that a lot of commonly used code is out of engine. And out of engine, I mean up there on GitHub, supported by the community. So if you have some problem, you can just go in and fix it. Interrogation uses a lot of community supported projects, and from it we've also created a number of open source projects that just came out of Interrogation, like a sound F-mode sound engine integration, a bunch of random scripts that we can use in other games of ours, and a lot of other things. And they're on GitHub, and everyone can contribute, everyone can modify them, look over them, and see if they suit their needs. And that's really cool. And what's also cool is that the same applies for the engine. So if something goes wrong, then I can go complain to Björn, but if they don't have the time to fix it, I won't stay for I don't know, 6 months waiting for a bug to be fixed with my release impending. So I can just go in and fix it if I really need it, and that's really cool and not something that you can say about other engines. Also, porting was pretty much just build and run for most of these platforms. We had some issues with Android because our game is very big and we went over the 100 megabyte APK limit, but we managed to fix that with an extension that we wrote, and now it's on GitHub, and all is well. So I've talked about my workflow, but let's talk a bit about everyone else, people that aren't as technical. And the thing is, Defold is very welcoming to built-in Git integration into their editor. There's also a very user-friendly way to get started with Git using the GitHub desktop app. So pretty much everyone in our team can clone the project from GitHub and just get started, because this is supposed to be a zero setup process, as Björn said. So you can just download the game. It's a pretty complex game, a lot of assets, a lot of native codes, but you don't need to have any sort of toolchain, and it goes into it builds in under 1 minute, and incremental builds are something like a few seconds. So that's really amazing. And the way we sort of achieve this is that we have a post-processing build script that actually builds final binaries, because we need to do a lot of things after Defold is done with it. With our game, we need to do a lot of other things specific to our game. And the cool thing about this is that it runs in GitHub Actions, because you can build from the command line with Defold, and we use that to do continuous deployments. Okay, let's get into some other department. Let's talk a bit about animation. So interrogation has most of the animations in interrogation look kind of like this. They're keyframe animations. They're characters with photographed and then drawn over, and this is a lot. There's a lot of characters with a lot of frames. This was a lot of work, and yet, due to the fact that Defold packs does atlas packing for sprites for us, we managed to get it under 400 megabytes, and more surprisingly, we managed to get it to run on iPhone 6, which I still can't believe. But there it is. It's small, it's running, and there's a lot of data in that game. And let's talk a bit about writing and game design, and why I bunch these together is because in interrogation we have this kind of crazy way of approaching game design through branching conversations. And to get that to work, we had to write a lot of tooling. And by a lot, I mean this thing. This is the level editor where you edit the interrogations themselves, and it's a monster. It's a React app, it's a browser app, and the way this works is that we've built in a web server into the game. So whenever you make a change in the editor, you can just hot reload the game, and it's gonna change the exact line that you just changed. Without having this has been a huge productivity boon for our game designers. And outside of the levels, we also have this narrative system, and we haven't managed to find anything that really fits what we needed, so we built our own. We built this language which we call Fuior. It compiles to Lua. We have an Atom plugin for it, which does syntax highlighting, and it also does the same hot reload thing. And the way that works is that we could build the compiler as a native extension into the game during debug builds, and it compiles really fast on default servers. And in the final game, we just compile the final files to Lua and exclude the native extension, and it works beautifully. Yes, and I think that was mostly all. And we're really excited about Defold. And we're also working on a new game, which we call Domains of Dusk. It's a strategy game in a modern Gothic setting, which we're really excited about, and we really hope to look forward to releasing it. And this is us. If you wanna look us up on GitHub, give us an email, look up our game, you're free to do so. So yes.
Thank you very much.
If you have any questions.
Thanks a lot. Guys, this was a very fruitful lecture. Thanks for the details about Defold and about how did you implement the technology in the game. This was great to know. We are unfortunately running a little bit short of time. So guys, we do have a few questions from the audience in the lectures chat. So if you do have a few minutes, please log into WN Hub platform to spend a few minutes talking with people who want to know more about Defold Foundation and the integration of the technologies. Thanks a lot once again.
Thanks.
Goodbye and take care.